Picture this, you're the UK's richest person and you're in love with the Land Rover Defender. And when in 2016 the Land Rover Defender as we knew it ended, they desperately wanted more of the same. But what came with something a lot more luxurious. And that person, Sir Jim Radcliffe, who loved Defenders, wasn't happy. So, 6 years later, and maybe a couple of lawsuits, we have the product of that disagreement with Land Rover. It's this, the INEOS Grenadier. And in this video, I'm going to be driving it off-road, which you will have seen in other videos prior to now, but crucially also on-road. What does it drive like on-road as well? I'm Jonny Smith, this is The Late Brake Show, and this video is proudly supported by blackcircles.com, the UK's largest online tyre retailer, providing a comprehensive click and fit service. So although we've seen the Grenadier quite a lot, this is the first time I'm going to be driving one, not just off-road, but more importantly on-road, in right-hand drive finished form. Let's talk exterior design. Remember, these are made in France, in a place called Hambach, an ex-Mercedes factory, I believe. There are 4 specs of Grenadier. 1 2-seater commercial vehicle, 5-seater commercial vehicle, a Trial Master spec named after a Bellstaff jacket, or this, the Field Master, which is also named after a Bellstaff jacket. Sir Jim Radcliffe, I think, owns a stake in Bellstaff. I think he saved it from going out of business, actually. Exterior design, let's start at the front. Front grille, a little bit controversial. Some people say it looks a bit ugly. I actually think it looks better in the metal than it does in photos. And it very much reminds me of a Santana. I don't mean Carlos, the expert guitar player. I mean a Land Rover built under license in Spain for many, many years that looks slightly like a Defender, but not quite. These lights inboard here, these work with full beam. They're full LED headlights. You've got the raised bonnet, as you'd expect to see, with the really flat wings. This is the first car, I believe, in the world to have a homologated winch on the front, so you can order it as standard with a winch, all pre-wired. In fact, there's a lot of pre-wired stuff going on in this car. But I'm down here because you've got 2 huge towing eyes, you can see there, and big skid plates, front and rear, as standard. Remember, this is sort of pleasantly old school because this has a ladder separate body chassis design, just like many old cars from the last 100 years, and that was the way they decided to do it. Full box section ladder chassis, which is e-coated, then powder coated, then wax injected and guaranteed for 12 years against corrosion. And then bolted onto that is a galvanized steel body. And at the moment, the only Grenadier body shape you can get is this 5-door. There will be a shorter wheelbase, probably a 2-door, think Defender 90. And there's also, you can pre-register your interest in a double cab pickup truck. So taking you around to the side of the Grenadier, this particular version has alloy wheels. A lot of them come with steels. Personally, I prefer the steels, but that's just the way it is. So when you order your Grenadier, you can actually option it with more off-road focused tyres, like this particular demo car. This has got BF Goodrich all-terrain TAs on it. It comes as standard with Bridgestone, more road-focused tyres. Either way, if you're going to order new tyres for your car, you can go on the Black Circles website, blackcircles.com. Simply put your registration number in on the configurator and it will come up with a huge selection of tyres for your budget and your vehicle. And you can also then click and decide where you want them to be fitted from an operator near you. I can see the IBAC springs here and the Bilstein suspension. This is because it's a separate body chassis car. There's a lot of old school going on here, rugged old school. It has solid beam axles made by a company called Carraro, who do a lot of heavy plant agri stuff. It's a steering box, steering system, which the only new car that I can think of which has that is the Jimny, the Suzuki Jimny, which we've owned, and that has solid axles as well. This particular car has the optional rock sliders on it as well. But the most interesting part of the Grenadier, the bit that I'm really fascinated with, is this, what they call the utility belt, which is this line all the way around here where you can click and attach stuff to. So each door can cope with 40 kilos of weight. So jerry cans, guns, Pelly type hard case packs, you name it, you can fit stuff on here. And the only other car that I know of that has sort of external clip-on capability of luggage is the Morgan Super 3, ironically. A very different car to this. I did do a walk around of that particular car, and I'll put a link above my head for that. Up here though, the roof as standard, I believe can cope with 100 kilos of weight. Yeah, 100 kilos without a roof rack. With the roof rack, you can option it with a sort of an expedition tray. That can cope with over 400 kilos. There's a lot of different places you can add stuff on. And then under these, I think, is it under here? Yeah, under here you have pre-wired power takeoff. So say if you want to order it and immediately fit spotlights, or you want power source when you're camping, the car comes pre-wired with a load of that, and I'll show you the control panel for that inside. Right, it's time to go for a paddle in the Grenadier. Before I do that, strictly speaking, I should press the wading button, which is one of these buttons on my center console here. So I'm going to hold that down, and then I press it again, just in case I don't accidentally press it. And then I can wade up to 800 mil. And what that does, by pressing that, is it deactivates the parking sensors, and it also stops the fan, the cooling fan, running on the radiator so that doesn't scoop up water. And the diesel version has the DPF. Right, time to wade. It's been a while since I've been in this pool. I used to go in this quite a lot with fifth gear. I really like these skylights. There we go. Effortless. So on this off-road course that we're on here, I have to be chaperoned. But one thing you can do on the fly in the Grenadier is you can go from locked to unlock, or unlock to lock diff mode while you're moving, which is just that, lift the collar and move that lever across. But you can't, what you can't do on the fly is go from low range to high range. So because it's an auto, it's effortless to do this sort of thing really, and you've got your off-road mode engaged. There's a weird juxtaposition in the Grenadier, weird good, where you've got lots of analog, manual handbrake, manual stick for the high-low ratio and lock diffs. But yet, I got the window down because I wanted to hear the engine and stuff, and it's just so smooth and modern. There is this strange mix between old school and modern, which I like. I do like it. It'll be interesting to see what this is like out on the road with this separate body chassis, with the trad steering box steering, but yet with a modern drivetrain. We're in a lot of mud now. Slithering around. We're on the BF Goodrich all-terrain tyres, which are more off-road focused. Right, time for some traversing with wet, muddy tyres. This is when you don't want 150, 250 kilos on the roof. It's not appropriate for this moment. All the bits that are sort of could easily get scuffed or knocked off, wing mirrors, bumper corners, stuff like that, they're not expensive. They're not made of expensive materials. I like that about it. It's been well thought through. This is a car born for adventure. It's sort of utility first, whereas modern Land Rovers, I think, have gone aesthetics too deep into the lux and the aesthetics, really. Right, up until now we've been in high range with the lock diffs. To go into low range you have to stop the car, stop the Grenadier, knock it into neutral on the stick here, like that, and then lift the collar and move the stick. back like so. It's quite physical. You get an L on the dash, this little tiny dash piece here, and then into D. And now we're in low range with lock diffs. So you can hear it's already racing the engine, but we're going to go up quite a scrabbly, loose gravel hill. But you've got that lovely silky straight six. This one's the petrol one, both 3 litres, both turbo. Right, you can obviously hear the engine revving up because we're still in low range. We're going to descend down this steep hill, and that's when I'm going to activate downhill control with that one press of the button. And I'm going to just slow it down on the cruise control first, so I'm at the minimum pace, which I think is like a couple of miles an hour, well, 2 miles an hour, look. But if I want to go a little bit quicker, just knock it up with the cruise buttons, foot off the gas. That's 5 miles an hour. It's about as fast as I want to go really before I start to get a bit twitchy. You know what I said before about that kind of juxtaposition between old tech and new tech? You've got the old tech here with the lock diffs and all that stuff, but yeah, you've got digital fuel gauge and temp gauges, and there's a big off-road mode actually on the screen, which delivers all sorts of information, and of course you've got a compass here. So you've got all of your pitch and your roll, and I'm going to go up the hill now, and this hill here is deep, soft sand. So for that we obviously don't need downhill descent mode. So I'm going to stop, and I'm going to lock the rear diff, which has the flashing light there, and then I'm going to stick it in D and see what happens. And the Grenadier will just mash through it, because that's what the Grenadier's been built to do. But the thing about the Grenadier is also there's loads of brutal brambles and stuff, but I have the feeling, because there's lots of plastic cladding, it's not the kind of car which you can option in, you know, fancy kind of pearlescent paint. It'll be fine. You would not buy this car, I don't think, unless you were going to use it for utilitarian means. Right, we're coming up to another descent. This one's concrete, man-made. I'll stick it back into downhill mode. You can actually see on the dash, what's quite interesting in a second is it gives you your steering angle, which is less useful in this scenario, but more useful. Oh, this is steep, you dirty swat. Oh man, there goes my notebook. Oh, and while I'm doing this, if you want to know all about the departure angles and approach angles, I've got a clipboard, and that's all the information that you need right there. I'll put it on the screen though for people that care about stuff like that. All you need to know is basically the Grenadier will go anywhere you want it to. In fact, it'll go more than you want it to. And you can see on the dash here, if you clock in any of this, you see the pitch, the roll. That's the steering angle there, look. If I put a bit of right hand down in, look, gives me 8 degrees. Lots of information. Come round to the back of the Grenadier and you're met with a ladder and a full-size spare wheel. Useful again. All of this is dictated by utility. This is not a car that's pretty. This is a car that's led by, I guess, rugged engineering and utility. And I really appreciate that, because that doesn't happen a lot in modern car design. And I guess that was the remit for Sir Jim Radcliffe. 150 kilos on a ladder, and of course the weights that you can bear on the roof is useful for things like camping and expedition. Versatility. Talking of which, so this is your 70-30 rear door split here, and it comes with an optional table which can clip onto there, but you can also put that table on the side utility belt kind of wherever you want. That's the point of this car, of the Grenadier. You can kind of do whatever you want. Talking of which, you can kind of order it in various configurations. You don't have to stick to the Fieldmaster, this, or the Trial Master. There are various different things you can do. This is just a serving suggestion, I suppose, and it's hard for me to get through all this in a video. Boot space. You'll notice, as standard, rubberized floor throughout. It has, I think, 5 or 6 bungs that you can release, so you genuinely can kind of fill it with water and then release all the water. So from the center console down, it is fully waterproof. The center console is splash proof, I guess you'd say. You probably don't want to pressure wash it. So Again, really utilitarian. The seats fold down 60/40, and I'll demonstrate that now because underneath the seats is an auxiliary battery and the whole fuse box in a waterproof enclosure. So there's no ECUs in the floor that are vulnerable. It all lives in this weird little area under the back seat area. Oh, I've realised also you can open and close this. Again, this is quite useful. So ordinarily you have to close the doors in a certain sequence. The idea with this is you can close this and you can camp on the roof, let's say, and still get up and down on the ladder, and this door shuts whilst this one stays open. So they're kind of ambidextrous in that respect. Circular rear light clusters, quite big. And of course, I can't forget to mention 3.5 ton towing capability, which a lot of these vehicles, that's what it's all about for some people. Big chunky towing eyes, permanent towing eyes, skid plates that are functional, and electricity outputs there and there that are, again, all baked in as standard. You don't have to get all this stuff fitted aftermarket by an electrician. So continuing that relationship with brands who are obviously really good at what they make, like the axle guys, Carraro, Ibach, Bilstein, BMW for the engines under the bonnet, and the ZF for the gearboxes. The seats are Recaros. You see the little emblem here. This particular version is leather, heated as standard, but you can get cloth. You can option the cloth as heated, which would be my preference. This car even has optional carpets. They don't normally. They're normally just the bare rubber floor, keeping it nice and utilitarian. Loads of headroom, as you'd expect, but also, again, loads of places to hook and anchor things, because the point of the Grenadier is to be out and about working for a living, working hard. This is the poshest version they do, the Fieldmaster, which is why it's got leather, which is why it feels a little bit more kind of homely. This is more your sort of school run car. In fact, I liken this to the previous generation of Mercedes G-Wagon before it went fully modern, and the non-AMG version, which started at what, 90 odd grand? So although you're looking at this thinking this is 70 grand, that's a lot of money, in some respects, it's reasonably priced considering what you're getting and how long it's supposed to last. So look at the front. I'm not going to go into shed loads of detail about the cabin now because I'll do it while I drive because I haven't got much time today. This particular body style, like I said before, is the Fieldmaster, which means it comes with these cool skylights either side of this massive roof console of buttons. It's just like an aircraft, basically, like that sort of etched style. It's like being in a sound booth. If you've ever been in a traditional sound studio, audio studio, this is the way all the controls are laid out. Now in pictures it looks horrible, but I kind of get it when I'm seeing it in reality. You've got, you know, each of these come out with Allen bolts and you can lift it all out and move it all, and it's just pleasantly functional. It's all very big and chunky, so you can use it with gloves, or there is a touchscreen. And whilst you can touch stuff and move things around and operate it, most of it can be done through here and here. So for example, there you've got your diff lock buttons, there you've got your off-road and wading modes, here you've got your electric stability control and downhill descent, exterior lights, and then basically all of these big toggles here are pre-wired power points for all the power points around the car. So let's say you did order it with huge kind of safari light bars on the front. You could pre-wire it to this switch here, which is already there. It's already up there as factory. And there's no big binnacle in front of the driver. Oh, and a manual handbrake, because there's a lot of manual going on with this, just like that there. You have to manually lock the diffs, manually go from high to low ratio gearbox. And of course, what everyone talks about is that there, the BMW style gear shifter, because it is a BMW motor and because it uses that ZF 8-speed auto. There is no manual for the Grenadier. Right, interesting start to this road drive. It's just a blade key, an old school blade key. Why? Because it's easy to clean and it's not loaded with technology. Stick it in the hole, remember when we did that? Not like that, just to start the car. Start the Grenadier up, keep wanting to call it the Grenadine. Manual handbrake, into D. And this is the bit, to me, that's more interesting than off-roading, because this car was developed to be the most hardcore off-roader in the world, actually. So if it wasn't good off-road, then it's failed instantly. But whoever buys one of these is bound to be driving it on the road a lot of the time, because that's just the nature of the beast. Question is, what does it feel like? Both the engines from this car are BMW, both 3 litre, both straight 6, both turbocharged. Either the B57 diesel or this, the B58 petrol. Petrol is 286 PS, 249 PS with the diesel, but the diesel has more torque. From like idle almost, 1200 RPM, it has maximum torque. But both these engines have been recalibrated and mapped to produce torque over absolute power. What I do know is I drove it around with the window down because I just wanted to hear that straight 6. It's that juxtaposition, isn't it, that I said earlier, of weirdly old school in places and weirdly new school. Having driven it off-road already and now on the road, I don't know if you can see, but my left knee sits higher than my right knee, or it feels like it, because there's a really large intrusion into the trans tunnel. And I believe that's for the exhaust manifold. So the exhaust manifold hugs the chassis for good ground clearance. But I actually find it, I can't get my left foot very comfortable. There's no big plinth, or not, I'm tall. And although the seat's pleasantly analog, you don't have electric seats because, again, they say it's just excess weight and excess tech that you don't need. I find it quite hard to adjust the seat. The knob for the backrest is really buried down there and I can't really get to it, which is slightly irritating. And the steering wheel, I get it to how I want it to be, and then I keep banging it, getting in and out of the car. And then the threshold is sort of chamfered at an angle where I sort of feel like I'm slipping out or slipping in. So some of the basics of the ergonomics of how you sit and drive it, I think, aren't quite right. Okay, let's do a cheeky 0 to 62. I'm supposed to do it in 8.5 seconds, this is, with a bit of stop-start. So that, yeah, like I say, 8.5 seconds to 62. The petrol car is definitely quicker. Diesel's closer to 10 seconds. Of course, this is not built to like go hard like an AMG G-Wagon, but that's the sort of car you'll never take off-road. It's sort of a waste of time, really. This is focused all around utility, with almost looks, aesthetics coming second. Because if I look at the plastics and things like that on here, they're no better than our old Suzuki Jimny. But yet the attention to detail on the panel here and the panel here is brilliant. And the touchscreen. And the steering wheel, actually, it's very tactile and feels well made. Toggle switches, some of them don't feel quite as substantial as I'd like them to. And I can tell those eye-back springs, those Bilstein shock absorbers, what they do is they stop the car from being very body rolly. If I compare this to a standard Jimny, for example, and I start doing this, of course you're going to get lean because it's got a high centre of gravity. It's a heavy car, this, it's all steel, but it actually has quite good road manners. I was expecting it to feel a lot worse. So going over rough roads, pockmarked roads like this, you don't get that much lateral kind of shimmy, which you do with sort of solid beam axle cars normally. It does feel like somebody's calibrated the suspension well. It's pretty well, and it's comfortable. I don't feel seasick in it. And while I'm behind this person on the bicycle, I must add to that point, the number of Land Rovers I've been in, modern Land Rovers, not old ones, various Discoveries and that kind of thing. And I just find them far too, for a daily driven car, unacceptably wallowy. When you look down the side with the mirrors here, and you look down the bonnet, there's no overhangs really on this car. Yes, of course it's a bonneted car, but it's so slab-sided. It's really easy to position on the road. It actually drives like a smaller car than it really is. I don't think I like the fact that the speedos here are not there. I've got a touch of the Tesla going on here, where I think it's such an obvious intrinsic thing that you need. You need speed here. You just do. So it could have had a little cheeky head-up display projector or something like that. But what's rescued the annoyance of that with me is the fact that it only has navigation that's projected through your phone. So in this case, Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. So your phone brings the nav to it. It's got something called Pathfinder, which is off-road only, and it was described to me as a sort of Hansel and Gretel breadcrumb trail. So when you go off into the bush or on safari or somewhere wild, it can track where you've been and you can add stop points. Love the Fieldmaster's twin manual sunroofs. Now, I can have mine up, but passenger doesn't have to, and you can option that on some of the other derivatives of Grenadier, just like so many of the extras. I mean, the extras list is absolutely massive. It's, you know, jerry can holders on the outside, carpets, you name it. There's pretty much an option for everything. I would definitely go for steel wheels though. I think this kind of car it doesn't suit having luxury added to it. Although the steering wheel does feel lovely, this soft leather, I just wouldn't order it with leather upholstery. I'd want the cloth. And the infotainment here, which you can either use as a rotary dial or a push-up, push-down, left-right joystick, that's useful. But again, I'm not totally convinced by the feel of it. Doesn't feel like it's going to be indestructible, and yet the premise of this car is that whole like future-proofed, can withstand anything remit. The attraction of this car is the engineering, the way it's been thought through. It's not the aesthetics. But then again, are people who are really into Land Cruisers really into their aesthetics? Not really. They're not particularly attractive. What's so cool about the Land Cruiser is the fact that you know it will get you there. You know it will get you there. And the thing for me, if we're going to take this sort of Land Rover versus Grenadier kind of fight going on, me as a journalist and as someone that drives and reviews a lot of cars, I personally would not buy a Land Rover at the moment, because I just see their reliability record as being not acceptable. Not on a car which sells you this dream of being off-roady and go anywhere. It won't go anywhere because it's overly complicated and I think goes to market too soon. Right, pull out of a junction, give it a bit of beanage. Love the turbo Silky 6. Such a good engine. It doesn't hang around, and the brakes feel really pretty good. And actually, considering, I mean, it's not a quick steering setup. What it is a rugged steering setup. It's built to withstand rocks and punishment. But when you're driving it round back lanes, B roads such as this, yeah, there's a delay in the steering. But there's going to be. Look at what it can handle off-road. Would you have one over a Defender? I couldn't resist it. Just for a size comparison, that is what a 110 traditional trad Defender looks like compared to the Grenadier. This one I'm driving now is the top spec. It's 69,000 quid. And at first I really sucked air in through my teeth and went, that is a lot of money. But the more I thought about what spec this is, and the idea that you buy it and keep it for a long time, it's this lesser done idea now of not built-in obsolescence. It's the opposite of buy a car brand new and keep it for a long time. 10 years, 12 years, 15 years. I like that, and I think more manufacturers should do it. But the only reason why this car exists is because the richest man in Britain, Sir Jim Radcliffe, became fixated with replacing a classic Defender with something that wasn't too luxurious. Do you think the Defender has become too luxurious and too posh to push, if you will? So I'm hustling back lanes now, and the chassis feels like it's doing all right, actually. Where I'm starting to worry a little bit is the steering, because the communication is not great. But for a beam axle, separate body chassis thing, it's surprisingly good actually. It's surprisingly flat. You could look at this thing and say it's quirky for the sake of being quirky, but I disagree with that. This is one man's fixation with creating a totally fit-for-purpose adventure utility vehicle where there's a gap in the market and he can afford to bring this to market and probably lose a lot of money doing so. And I really applaud that. This is not a car for everybody. This is a niche car. That's the way you have to look at it. But in its niche, is it king? I've waited 6 years to kind of drive this car, really. 6 years is a long time. And whilst at the moment it's only available as a petrol or diesel, they've been developing a hydrogen version iteration for several years. And actually INEOS are in partnership with Hyundai for that, using the technology of the Hyundai model, the Nexo. There is also going to be another INEOS vehicle, a ground up battery electric car that's going to be smaller than this and probably a little cheaper than this, but it will be totally different in terms of chassis, and I don't know whether it'll look similar, but they've likened it to the Ford Bronco versus the Bronco Sport, or perhaps the Discovery and the Discovery Sport. Different market. When I first saw one of these in the metal, it was at the Goodwood Festival of Speed event, and I actually stood next to a couple of customers who'd put deposits down, and they were seeing it for the first time with their own eyes. And a couple of them were farmers, and they were opening the back end up and measuring it to see if it would fit a ewe in with a couple of lambs, because they said, we're going to use this. He said, we normally buy Ford Rangers and they'll last on our farm about 5 years before they're really in a bad state. He said, if this is the price of 2 Rangers, or it could be 2.5 Rangers, or the commercial version would be 2 Rangers, he said, and it lasts for a decade or more with residuals that will be higher than a Ranger, he said, it kind of stacks up. So I can see the rationale there. What are its rivals? Well, let's think about this. Jeep Wrangler, which you can get in 2 and 4 door. Obviously, new Defender in commercial form. I'd even think Ford F-150 Lightning or something like that if you want full EV or a normal Lightning. And then high-spec pickups like Hiluxes, Toyota Hiluxes, which are difficult to kill and a proven work vehicle. Don't you just love it when brands or products are born out of a grudge? That's what the Grenadier is. This was born out of a grudge against Land Rover, who Sir Jim Radcliffe of INEOS believed didn't make a good enough product, didn't go back to its roots enough. So thus created this. What happened to Lamborghini? Why does Lamborghini exist as a brand? Because Mr. Lamborghini bought a Ferrari and thought it was a bit cack and not very well put together. Hello. Do we have a history repeating itself, but in the off-road fraternity? Maybe we do. And I love the concept of this, not being a looker, but being born fit for purpose and giving the V's to built-in obsolescence. Amen to that. I'd love to buy a car that I know is going to last 15, 20 years and go into the bush and come back, like so many Land Rovers don't. Would I buy a new Land Rover right now for the same kind of money? Actually, I don't think I would. I think they've lost the guts of what they're about. This is interesting, especially when it starts in the mid £50,000 rather than the £70,000. The question is, are you one of the people that's ordered one of these or is really interested? Let me know. Or are you one of these people that wouldn't be seen dead in a thing called an INEOS Grenadier? Whatever, I really admire the fact that this is born fit for purpose and really by somebody who can afford to just do it. Amen to that. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Late Break Show. If you haven't already subscribed, why not subscribe? Maybe you want to become a Patreon and watch videos such as this early and get blogs from me a couple of times a week. This particular episode is proudly supported by blackcircles.com.